Genesis House and the Friends in Recovery podcast are proud to bring you Answering the Call, the First Responder podcast. Join your hosts, Mike the Podfather and Jersey Ed, as they address the real issues in health and wellness for first responders, from physical and mental health to relationships and work-life balance. We leave no stone unturned. Answering the Call, the First Responder podcast is available on Facebook, Podbean, iTunes, and YouTube, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, here are your friends in recovery answering the call. Welcome to another episode of Answering the Call, the First Responder podcast, sponsored by Genesis House and produced by Sweets Productions in Beverly, Mass. And now, here are your hosts, the Podfather Mike Miles and Jersey Ed.
Thank you, Sweets. As always, we are happy to be here, ready and available to help our first responders out there and across the country and abroad.
That's right, Mike. I love learning about all the new topics we talk about, and so do our listeners, and I know that by all the emails and all the social media chatter we get. We get a hell of a lot of social media chatter. So, look us up on Facebook, Answering the Call on Facebook, and that's where all the chatter is.
Chitter chatter. Chitty bang bang.
This show's tough, man.
Oh, man.
But we do have a good guest
Good thing
today.
you're not making money doing
I
this.
know. I'll never be a star of podcast world. But again, we have a good guest today, Jeff Dill. Can't wait to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, he's just quite a guy. I was reading his bio already, and boy, I'll tell you, he's this guy's giving it all back.
He is.
Talking about paying it back.
Yeah,
boy,
exactly. This guy's good. So, real quick, I want to give my podcast pick of the week. I I've been doing that for some time now.
Yeah,
I do like that.
You do like that.
Yeah.
I know.
A lot of good ideas.
Yeah. But listen, we do have probably one of the best shows out there. I'd have to say that, right?
Of course, yeah.
But
rivaled only by like Joe Rogan. Or
yeah.
something, you know
Well,
what I mean?
I think he listens to us too.
Yeah, probably.
But there are other good shows out there. There are other good information. I think we were having this. I don't know if we had it on air or whatever, but podcasting is it gets the people like you and all three of us in this room out there. Oh, we didn't introduce Sweets. Hey, Sweets.
Hi. How are you?
Sorry, Sweets.
Sorry, Sweets. Podcasting gets the everyday guy out there, and the everyday guy has a lot to say.
Yeah.
I mean, not just the Howard Sterns or the Joe Rogans or, News Talk Radio where you have to have a degree and go on and talk about things. They get paid a hell of a lot of money. We don't get shit for it, but we're getting all the information out to the right people, and there are good shows out there. So my podcast pick for the week is Rock Bottom to Recovery. He's actually a local guy. He's a Massachusetts guy, and he is I think he's a Suffolk County corrections officer that's in recovery. And I just found him the other day, and I just listened to one quick episode, so I'm not too versed in it, but I will start listening to a little bit more. And he's just fascinating. He's a corrections officer that's working in corrections, and I believe he's the EAP for the corrections, and he does this wonderful podcast, and it's called Rock Bottom to Recovery, and check it out. And of course, this will all be in the show notes. You guys will be able to kind of be able to look it up, and I think we even put links in now. Is that where the satellite does that?
Satellite does that.
Good,
yeah.
Excellent. I seen Mike. You were on the satellite up in the roof, kind of kicking it before, making sure it was working.
Sure everything's working.
Good.
I got those,
the wind kind of knocked it off balance.
I had to throw up the moonraker for the
the moonraker.
we had to get that moonraker up there. But I was talking to a guy on my CB this morning, and he was telling me get a new moonraker.
That's right.
He was from Canada, and he had kind of a accent, The moonraker, he said.
That's right.
This guy, what was it called? Rock Bottom?
Rock Bottom to Recovery.
Yeah, it sounds good. Anybody that's the EAP for a sheriff's department or corrections department, they're going to know some stuff.
They got their stuff
because
together.
Let me tell you, it's not easy being a correctional officer. I did it for 14 months, but more importantly, it's not even so much the officers or the inmates. That's the easy part. It's the other officers, the administration, the public. I mean, let me tell you, that's a tough job. I'd like to take one of these high-end Congress people, one of the squad, into a prison for about 8 hours and see if they were singing the same tune.
Exactly.
Because I got to tell you, I saw in a news clip last night a guy who was being executed. He was he was found guilty in 1991. And I now he's going to get put to death. And I thought, I think they were hoping he'd die from old age, for Christ's sake. He only burnt a woman to death in a car, He just lit her on fire and let her burn to death in a car. But, unfortunately, we live in a society where I think liberal people are just starting to criticize everything. And another thing I heard this morning on the radio, which I thought was very interesting, was that song "Baby It's Cold Outside."
Yeah.
No, there's a new version now. And you don't want to. It was like a date rape. I never in my life. I heard the song 1,000 times. I never thought of date rape.
Well, they're changing the song
me.
now.
Yeah,
They
did.
Yeah,
I heard the new
changing it,
version today.
Yeah.
I heard the new version today.
Not everybody's happy about that.
Yeah.
No, it's ridiculous. And if you're a screaming liberal out there, do us a favor. Turn this off. I don't even want to.
I mean, if you listen to a lot of old songs, they do get creepy as you get older.
They
You're like,
do,
wait, what the fuck did he just say?
I know. It is. But you know what? It is what it is. And I don't know. But let me ask you, Mike, because you worked in the inside the walls for over a year. And,
14 months.
So why, like, if I knew this guy was shot, if I knew this murderer shot and killed somebody and he is guilty and he was sentenced to death, why does it take him 25, 30, 40 years to put him to death? That's all those years that we have to feed and keep them healthy and turn the lights on for him, turn the lights off for him. And
well, you're going to hear many people's opinions. I think the opinion that I think would make me think twice about the death penalty, and I'm all for the death penalty, believe me. And when I talk about the death penalty for certain people, I can name names, and maybe I will, but I think a lot of people assume that there are innocent people put to death. Has that happened? It probably has happened, and you know what? I can understand, but that doesn't mean 100%. Everybody is going to fall into that category. There was a woman and her 2 children that were murdered, and the suspect who did the murdering, his name was Daniel Plant. He's in prison right now, and he did this back in the 90s, and he systematically took 2 little children off the bus. 3rd and a 2nd grade brother and sister, and systematically drowned them. This is after he had raped and sodomized their mother, and this was in Townsend, Mass. And then he sat and had a meal, and he waited for the kids to come home so he could kill them too. Yeah, and he was 17 when this happened, and they looked at it all different ways, but he's still in jail, and it's a mockery. Richard Speck, a guy who killed 5 nurses out in Chicago back in the 60s, he was in prison, and they had actual recordings. He had hormone shots, he had breasts and everything, and he was telling how lucky he was to still, be able to live the life he lived after he systematically killed 5 nurses.
Yeah, I just don't understand it.
Yeah,
I
and I can go on and on. I mean, it's just sickening, but
Yeah.
we're in a society today where nobody wants to, take responsibility.
I understand. I mean, I understand both ends of the coin, but if you're guilty, cut and dry, and they know you murdered them, why keep them around? I mean,
That's right.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's my thinking, crazy thinking. But anyways, this topic had nothing to do with our guest. I hope he's probably shaking his head over there and wondering what the hell's going on.
Jeff Dill, yes.
Jeff Dill is
organized a counseling service for firefighters, CSFF. Those are all capital letters, and was established based on the tragic events that surrounded Hurricane Katrina. We spoke to Jeff a little bit before the show and to get him ready, and basically there's a guy that has just given the rest of his life to helping firefighters, and his main cause that he's concerned about is the high rate of suicides by firefighters.
Yeah. And the name of his company is Firefighters Behavioral Health Alliance, FBHA.
That's correct.
Hey, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jeff.
Well, I appreciate it. It's an honor to be on here.
Yeah. I've been hearing a lot about you and a lot of good things, and we've been reading through your bio that Melissa sent over to us, and you're quite a fascinating person. What you have accomplished in your 32, 33 years old in life?
No, 37. I just turned 37.
All right. Well, I was trying to make it look good.
You look good for your age.
Hey, you see this face? Do I look like I'm 37 and I know I need a lot of work to make it look good.
we all have a face for radio, as Mike always says. So.
Well, that's true, because I was in radio years ago. So
okay, good.
I was
good God.
Outside of Chicago, I was a sports director for a small radio station, but
Really?
I had the opportunity to cover the Chicago Bulls.
Wow. Very nice.
So after the games, I'd sit right on a court, and Michael Jordan would dunk right underneath us.
Oh,
and I'd
my
go in
God.
the locker room and interview him and things.
Wow.
I've done a lot of. I cannot complain about my life. I worked 10 years part-time on the PGA Tour.
Wow.
I worked for a minor league ball club. Meanwhile, I always had a full-time job. And so I've always, and I thank my parents for that, just the way that they worked. And my dad worked 2 or 3 jobs. It's just, it just came natural.
That's great. That's great. Welcome to Sports Radio Talk, everybody, with your host, Jeff Dill. No, that's the wrong show. Yeah, the wrong show.
Hey, Jeff, did you know back then that Michael Jordan was going to be the most famous basketball player ever, the best basketball player ever? I mean, I was a Boston Celtics fan, and those back in the '80s when there was some serious contentions. You know, Jordan scored 61 points one night, and we still won. You know, and it was like
61.
I was at that game, and I'll tell you, I was just, and this is when he still had hair. He hadn't started shaving his head yet. But I was like, wow, who is this guy?
Well, Jeff, tell us your career after the sports reporting, if you don't mind.
No problem. I actually started as a volunteer firefighter in 89, 90 up in the northwest burbs of Chicago. But I was born and raised in Rochester, New York.
Oh, okay.
So we used to go up to Boston 2 or 3 times a year. So I took in all the Red Sox games.
So you guys have something in common.
I don't know if you can see it right here. This is it.
There it is. I was at the last game.
Here, guys. I'm out of here.
I was at one of those games.
Yeah, 67 was the first year I ever went to a Red Sox game. I was 6 years old.
Wow.
So I became a
Great year.
fan. And so, but anyways, I started as a volunteer. And then in 1995, Palatine Rural Fire Department was founded in Inverness, Illinois. I thought, well, I'm 33 years old. I'll give it a shot. I've done, like I said, so many things. And I was fortunate to be a founding member of the department. I moved up rather rapidly through the ranks. And then I retired in 2015 after 20 years career-wise, 26 overall. And there's reasons why I left early. My wife had moved to Arizona. She had our 2 daughters had moved down there, and our grandchild. And plus, she had a lot of health issues, my wife. And so I said, hey, you know what? I'll put my 20 years in. We'll move to Arizona, and we'll see what we can do from there.
Yeah.
But 2011, actually, and how it all started for us in this behavioral health realm was actually Hurricane Katrina. In 2005, Division I outside of Chicago sent down numerous firefighters, including a couple from our department. And when they came back, they showed me the pictures they were picking up people in the streets and the animals that littered the landscape. And so they went to counselors, good people, but they just didn't understand the culture and language of the first responders. And so that's when I decided to go back, get my master's degree, and became a licensed counselor. And then in 2009, I originally founded Counseling Services for Firefighters. And that's where I was training counselors and chaplains. Hey, you want to work with us? You need to understand us. We're a little different. Not that it's wrong from my view, but we're just a tad bit different. And then in 2010, I started receiving emails and phone calls from around the world saying, do you do anything about firefighter suicides? I said, I didn't know we had a problem. And so I contacted all the major players, United States Fire Administration, the National Fire Academy. You give me an acronym, I contacted them, and no one kept any data. So that's when FBHA was founded, and we're still the only organization in the United States that tracks both EMS, firefighters, and this year we added dispatchers. Suicides.
Good.
Is there a high rate of suicide amongst dispatchers?
Well, I don't know if the rate's as high as fire and EMS, but we don't know because, like I said, we're just starting to track
capturing
it.
the numbers, yeah.
Absolutely. We're just trying to capture the numbers. And even with the fire and EMS, we only estimate about a 50 to 55% reporting to us. So there's a lot of people that don't know us, even though I travel over 100,000 air miles every year.
Yeah. Wow. Now, tell us a little bit about your company, Firefighters Behavioral Health Alliance. That was the acronym you were talking about before.
Yeah, we can keep that short. It's FBHA.
FBHA. FBHA.
But if people go right, FBHA. If people go to our website, which is ffbha.org, on the front page is a validation confidential reporting system. And so what happens is people will send in this email. It's like a 15-second form. But when I receive it, I have no idea where it comes from. The emails are scrubbed. But I then contact the fire or EMS chief. And to date, we have validated 1,400 of these tragic events. And I have personally spoken to about 1,340 fire and EMS chiefs to hear the stories, the methods, the reasons, not only how they died, but how they lived. And we take all this data and we build it into workshops. And so now when we have 7 different workshops, everything from PTSD and suicide to addictions, depression, general behavior. We have one just for spouses and partners, family members. We have the one from counselors. We took that over from CSFF. How to create a behavioral health program. So I've consulted with San Diego Fire, Hillsborough County, and other departments around the United States on how to create a behavioral health program. Then we have one in regard to retirement called Saying Goodbye, the Emotional Detachment, because we started noticing in our data that we're losing a lot of our brothers and sisters in retirement.
Really?
So
wow.
Yeah.
You want to explain a little bit about that?
If we look at sure, absolutely. Because if we look at the numbers, as difficult it is to get active fire and EMS, it's more difficult to get retirees because they move all over the country. But out of the 1,400, 246 have been retirees that we have validated. And out of those 246, 37 of them took their lives within the first week of retirement.
Wow.
And so that's a problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem.
Absolutely. Instead of just giving them a axe on a board and a party, how are we preparing them for that transition? Because when we interviewed 127 recently retired fire and EMS, the top 3 issues they had were loss of identity, loss of belonging, and lack of purpose.
Right.
And those are 3 key elements for human beings.
Right.
And so, like I said, 25, 30 years in our business, the police business, it goes away in a heartbeat. And have we prepared for it outside of the financial? I know what I'll get when I retire each month. Well, we need to start understanding the emotional impact.
Right. In my own private practice, Jeff, several years ago, I started doing exit interviews for correctional officers, police officers. So I would sit with them 6 months before their retirement and talk about what are you going to do? What do you have? Hobbies, education? Do you want to teach? I mean, a lot of these guys are 55 years old. They're still young men. When you're 25 and they tell you can retire at 55, it sounds old. But when you're 55, you realize you still feel the same way. You're not as strong physically or emotionally, but you have all that knowledge, all that ability. What I tell young cadets when I speak at academies is get yourself an education when you're in your 30s, 10 years on the job. Start thinking about doing something else, because when you do retire, like you said, no identity. You're not going to the firehouse anymore. You're not having that camaraderie with the fellow and female firefighters and talking about just bullshitting with each other. That's number one. Number two, the money does change. You're not getting the same amount of money. There's no overtime. There's no overtime shifts. But I think the identity is the big thing.
Yeah, that's huge. That's and Mike is a retired police officer, and we thank God we have him around. He's not a statistic.
I don't hold that against him.
Well, a firefighter told me yesterday the reason God invented police officers. No, I'm sorry. The reason God invented firefighters is so police officers would have heroes to worship.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty good. But the retiree thing that's pretty fascinating. Real quick, Jeff, we're going to take a break here. We're going to be right back. We're going to learn a little bit more about your program and talk a little bit more.
Friends in Recovery podcast. Be right back.
Yep, be right back.
Since 1992, Genesis House has been helping real people heal from addiction on their private recovery campus in beautiful Palm Beach County, Florida. Their family-owned program is accredited by the Joint Commission and offers detox and dual diagnosis treatment in a comfortable and confidential setting. The First Responder Recovery Program at Genesis House is led by a doctorate-level therapist with direct professional experience as a first responder himself. Treatment modalities focus on psychiatric care, relapse prevention, stress management, and trauma-informed care for PTSD. Learn why their individualized approach makes a difference for first responders. Call Genesis House today at 1-800-737-0933 to speak with someone who understands. Visit them on the web at www.genesishouse.net. It's time to start your journey to a long and successful recovery.
Hey, welcome back, Friends in Recovery podcast, answering the call. I am the Podfather. I'm sitting here with Jersey Ed, and we're talking with Jeff Dill.
Jeff Dill. What's up, Jeff?
Hey, you know what? Things are good. We're down in Boca Raton, Florida right now. We're doing 16 workshops for the Boca Raton Fire Department. This is our life. A couple of weeks ago, I was up in Alaska for a week.
Very nice.
Then down to Missouri and Arizona. So we travel around. The one thing that with our FBHA is we don't solicit for workshops. We don't call up fire departments, and yet we keep very, very busy. And we appreciate that because we're trying to educate. You had mentioned about education. I'm a firm believer in education because we're all one slip off a ladder changing careers.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
And so following up with education is key. But, a lot of things, we look at the data. What makes us different than every other organization out there is our workshops are based on the data, the thousands and thousands of interviews that we have done, and the hundreds and hundreds of family members. We do a lot for families. We have an annual weekend retreat for family survivors. We have a closed Facebook group. We have a scholarship program for children that have lost a mother or father in the EMS or fire world that took their lives. We just signed a lease with the city of Denver. The Denver Fire Department has donated property at one of their stations, Station 18, so we can build a memorial site.
Wow,
so that
that's
families
awesome.
know that their loved ones will be honored and remembered.
Right.
Wow.
Hey, Jeff, when you're watching TV as of late and you see these horrific fires going on out in California, what do you think? Well, I mean, these guys are working around the clock, some of them, guys and girls.
Well, we track wildland firefighters as well as military firefighters.
Oh.
Last year, we had a camper, and my wife and I, we drove across the United States, and we stopped up in California, and we stopped at some of the departments that had the campfire. And when you stand in front of these firefighters, my wife and I, and they are in tears because they say, look, every time we step outside, we see the destruction around us, and it brings back painful memories of recovering bodies. That workload, and wildland firefighters, they are put to the test.
Man,
and their issues they work their tails off for 8-9 months, and then they're laid off for 2-3 months.
Wow.
And that's a struggle, both emotionally, psychologically, financially. And so that's where we see where the wildland firefighters are truly struggling.
Right. Some of these firefighters parachute into these horrific fires. They don't even know if they're coming out. Several years ago, there were several firefighters killed. I think there was 9 of them. Maybe you remember, and they were doing a huge fire on a hillside, a mountainside, whatever it was. But they got trapped and they couldn't get out. And I thought to myself, they parachuted in here to do the best they could, and this was it. This was their demise. And the media covered it for about 30 seconds, and that was it. I thought they should have followed up, and there should have been a fund set aside for these brave heroes.
Yeah.
Well, and we can't forget the Yarnell 19, out in Arizona.
Yeah.
And so those 19 wildland firefighters that got trapped by the fire, and I met the one survivor, and he still struggles, but he goes out and he talks about it, how the shift commander told him to go stand up on the ridge, give us an idea of where the fire's at, and he looked down and said, "The fire's on you, the fire's on you," and that was it.
That was
it. It was just outside where we lived, where we retired to, out in Anthem, Arizona. And my one daughter, I was out of town, but she stood on one of the overpasses as 20 white hearse drove the bodies, and they had 20 because in case one hearse broke down, they had a spare to put the body in. But she said people were holding hands in tears, and I mean it's a tough job, that wildland firefighter, and I don't think they get the respect that they deserve.
No, we've never talked about them on our show, and that's one kind of quiet little department you probably never hear of. Now, Jeff, how did the FBHA help out that particular incident, or how is it the training, or were you guys there for peer support or anything along those lines?
Well, and it's great that you asked that because we do all those things. We, on an average, I get 7 to 10 phone calls a week from fire, EMS spouses. We work with the American Ambulance Association to find counselors. people call us and say, Jeff, do you have someone in our area? And so I do it for free. I vet 3 or 4 counselors because I know both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will call that firefighter back, or EMS personnel, whoever. And I say, well, here's 3 that I would feel comfortable in going with. I have 12 questions. I kind of weave through the conversation to see if I would feel comfortable. And then I tell them, well, now it's up to you. I mean, I can't work at it harder than you can, but it's up to you to go and see which one works for you. So we do that for free as well. The training, like I said, we keep that available. We have a workshop that helps peer support teams train. We go through actual scenarios that we've come through, and believe me, I've heard so many things, and the methods that some of our brothers and sisters have taken their lives is just incredible. I mean, one held a stick of dynamite in his mouth, another one put a flare gun down his throat. I mean, it's just, these are horrific. I mean, they're all bad.
Yeah.
But what's the level of pain, the depth of guilt, or whatever it is that they would torture themselves?
Right.
To go through
and
that.
I think you just said the magic word. I think it is a lot of guilt. You know, why am I here? Why are they, my brothers and sisters, not here? You know, well, how did I make it? And it's just like PTSD with these combat veterans that come back, and they're killing themselves at a high rate too. And you know, society needs to look at this. You know, the news media is first in line when we're burying somebody, you know, that died horrifically, but then they go away instead of, you know, staying on top of this and really trying to have some type of camaraderie and figure out some of these problems.
Yeah. And we just got a couple minutes left here. Oh, God, I'm sorry.
Well, the media is, you know, we get contacted every week. In fact, tonight we were told that a nationwide CBS News story about us is going to be, in firefighter suicides, is going to be on tonight.
Good.
So, but I was up in Boston, and they sent a crew out to interview me I was out at an old house. But, you know, let me quick say that the data, everything, we go back to the data, and the number one known reason for fire and EMS taking their lives, unknown is number one, but the number one known reason is marital and family relationships, followed by depression, medical and physical, addictions, and then PTSD. And then there are so many that have a combination of all those.
Absolutely.
That's crazy. Real quick, you stopped by Genesis' house yesterday. You visited us. And thank you very much for that. We really appreciate it. And we just came off our JACO certification, so everybody was kind of probably their hair pulled out. And but everything went well down there. And did you enjoy speaking to everybody?
I did, and one of the things that I try to do is wherever I'm at, I try to stop and visit. And I know of Genesis' house, but I never actually stopped in. I never really had the time. But I met Tim, and I was truly impressed. And I told my wife that one of the first things I said, you know what I really like about this? It's not this luxury living. I mean, it's clean, it's beautiful, but it's not intended. It's intended for you to go there and get the job done.
That's it.
Take care of yourself.
Well, you're very observant,
and I absolutely love that. And the surrounding, the grounds are impeccable. They're beautiful, but they're strict, and they're saying, hey, you've come here to do a job, and it is a job. The job is your recovery. It's not, they're there to help walk the walk with you, but it's up to you when you go down to Genesis house to take control of your life, and they will help you, but they're not going to you know, kid handle you. They're not there to babysit you, and I like that, and I like that mentality that they portrayed to me.
Good. Thank you. We appreciate it. And we're happy to stop by. Now, how can we get a hold of you? We got a couple minutes left, but how can we get a hold of you? Most important piece, if somebody's listening to the show and they want to get a hold of FBHA and be part of, or however they can do that.
Well, there's 3 ways. Of course, our website, which is www.ffb.ha.org. My email, which is jdill, like in pickle, so jdill@ffbha.org, or my cell phone, which is on the website because it's on 24/7, which is 847-209-8208. So it's 847-209-8208.
And it sounds like you're just like us. You're there when these guys need you. We're always there. We pick up that phone. We're always answering the call because that's the name of the show, answering the call, number one. And number two, because you don't know when a problem's going to strike. 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You got to be ready. You got to be here for these guys. And thank you for all your service. Thank you for everything you do for our firefighters out there. We really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it, and in your work too, spreading the message, and that's what we need. We need gentlemen like yourself to stand up and say, "Hey, you know what? We struggled, so if we did, chances are you might as well." To what degree, we don't know, but I appreciate what you're doing for our brothers and sisters, both in the blue and EMS and fire dispatchers as well.
Thanks, Jeff.
Absolutely,
Thanks.
Jeff. What a pleasure.
Thanks. Well, God, another good show, Jeff Dill, huh? Amazing.
Amazing.
Just the stuff that he's doing and everything as far as the FBHA, and you know, talking about the one thing that got me was a part of the show was the firefighters. What did he call them? The forest fire, not the forest firefighters.
Right. The guys who jump into fires.
Yeah, the guys who jump into fires.
They're not full-time firefighters. Basically, they work so many hours a year, and they're just there for these huge, horrific fires, like in California that's going on now.
Yeah.
Several
that
weeks
was
at a time.
That was fascinating to hear all that about the about how they do that, and the story that you told that the guy parachuting in and he knew that whole thing with the 19 bodies and.
Yep.
And all that, it was
he
crazy.
does some great work, and here's a guy that's so committed. He's retired, and he's just traveling all around the country, just spreading the word. I'm trying to prevent firefighters from committing suicide, helping their families, just getting recognition. Because, like I said earlier, the news media are the first ones in line to go to a firefighter's funeral, a cop's funeral, because it gets so many people in the public there, and then as soon as it's over, that's it. They don't pursue it. Why are firefighters committing suicide at such an alarming rate?
And that's what he's doing. He's figuring all that EMS.
Amazing guy. So.
And he also added the one thing I did like. He also added for this year the dispatchers, 911 dispatchers.
Yes.
They hear a lot of shit, man.
Right.
I mean, I think I shared this on another show. I was at a conference, first responders conference in Boise, Idaho. And it was crazy. They played a call which was just live. Well, it wasn't live, but it was recorded, and it was about this husband coming in, kicking the door in, and shooting everybody, and you heard it.
Right.
And this woman, I mean, I had to walk out of the room. I couldn't listen to it anymore.
Sure.
I mean, I still can have this vivid vision in my head.
Sure.
Probably just like the 911 operators do. So I'm glad they were able to add that into his,
Absolutely. I was a civilian dispatcher when I first got out of the Army for the Lowell Police before I became a correctional officer for almost 2 years, 22 months. And, back then they didn't have the equipment they have now. We had a ticker tape machine, and we'd punch in what we needed to send out, and we'd put it through a little machine, and it would go through. It was just a little strip of paper. And then I'd read all the ticker tapes that would come in. It'd come across the screen. I remember reading one night, I was sitting there on a quiet Sunday night, and it said, any state in the Northeast looking for the body of a young female, 5'2", blonde hair, blue eyes. They found her floating in a suitcase off of Miami. And that vivid description just stuck in my mind. This is my first introduction into police and what dispatchers do. And now they're delivering children. They're saving lives. They're trained in CPR. They're trained in child delivering. I mean, it's amazing. They're almost like obstetricians.
They're therapists. They're counselors. Everything.
Right. And people forget about them.
Crisis workers.
They
everything.
get paid peanuts.
They do. It's sad.
Right.
Yeah.
They should be making the same money cops make.
Yep. Absolutely.
Because they're doing the exact same job.
Yep. Absolutely. Mike, you got a patch over there. We forgot to do our patch. Who do you have there?
Well, this patch is from Germany. This is from a friend of mine who passed away about 20 years ago. He used to come to Lowell. He didn't come to Lowell. He came to the United States every 6 weeks. Once a year for 6 weeks to travel across the country. He was a German police officer. His name was Richard. And he just happened to come into the Lowell police station one day and asked me if I knew where he could buy some police patches. I sent him to a store in Haverhill and it's still there, called Neptune's. And it's a police supply store. And as a result of him going there, every year he'd come back and visit me. So I've had this patch for many years. I want to add it to the patches we have.
Absolutely.
Richard's no longer with us. He passed away. But he was a great multilingual. I mean, he spoke 5 different languages. He was just a great guy. And again, he was a policeman in Germany. This says Polizei on it, which means police in German. And when I was in the Army, I worked with the German police. I was an MP, and a lot of respect for those guys. And I just think it's interesting that, all these years I dug this out. I have a few more, but we'll be bringing them in week by week, and we'll talk about them.
Absolutely. Well, thanks.
You might want to tell our listeners about patches, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Mike. Please, anybody who's listening out there, any departments, EMS, firefighters, Army, Navy, whatever it is, if you guys can, please, email me, and I will give you an address where you can send the patches to. We'll just honor you guys just like now, like we did, and all the other ones that you can see over here. I'm on TV. I don't know, but they're over here somewhere.
Mike got it.
Mike got it. So if you're not watching, then you don't even know what we did. But but there are patches up on the walls, and we want to fill this whole banner up. You guys see the banner behind us. We want to get this banner filled up. So email us at help@friendsandrecoverypodcast.com. help@friendsandrecoverypodcast.com, and just drop me an email, and I will give you an address where you can send it to. The undisclosed location that we're in right now. So, but good show, Mike.
Yeah, great show.
Yeah, Jeff was great, man.
Oh, Jeff's wonderful.
Yeah, I could have talked to that guy
Jeff
for
Dill.
Jeff Dill. I could have talked to him all day, actually.
Yeah, he was
We
good.
actually, even before the show, we spent 25 minutes with him talking to him. I'm thinking to myself, what the hell are we going to talk about now? But there was plenty to talk about.
We've had some good guests, and he's definitely one of them. And so, hey, join us for future episodes by subscribing, and help us spread the word by sharing across social media. And a special thank you to our sponsor, Genesis House, for making this possible, along with our producer, Sweets, from the extraordinary, wonderful Sweets podcast studio in the beautiful town of Beverly, Massachusetts. Right. And Sweets, thank you for recording and broadcasting this podcast.
And, of course, if you have any questions, you would like to be a guest on the show, or you want to submit a question or for a topic for discussion, please visit our Facebook page at Answering the Call, the Friends in Recovery Podcast, or send, again, an email to us at help@friendsandrecoverypodcast.com.
And as always, we are grateful for the privilege to share our stories and insight with you, the listener.
Stay safe, everybody.
That concludes this episode of Answering the Call, the First Responder Podcast. Thanks to Genesis House for sponsoring the show and supporting our first responders who are struggling with addiction and mental health. Follow us on Facebook for past shows and updates. If you are interested in becoming a guest on the show, email us at help@friendsandrecoverypodcast.com.